Alex, you were talking about how I brought up
Yes.
this being the right show for us having gone through pandemic.
Yeah, well, because grief is a universal experience, but grief is a much more universal and recent experience for all of us because we all have things that we're grieving, whether we're grieving, the loss of loved ones, or we're grieving just this loss of time. I mean, for even the people who are the luckiest among us, we're still kind of like the folks who got blipped in the Marvel universe, to where we've lost this time that could have been, life that we were spending out doing stuff. And instead we were staying home, growing out beards and really long hair because it's not safe to go get your hair cut.
Mm-hmm. One of the most interesting things to me about grief and loss is how different cultures respond to death just across the world, where some cultures just kind of, it's a moment in time and the death happens and then, you're expected to move on. And other cultures, dedicate specific amounts of time, like, to mourn through that process. And some cultures dance and celebrate and sing and make it into a whole big party when someone passes away. And just the beautiful universality of that. And I've always kind of been envious, if I'm being totally honest, of how certain other cultures sometimes
they ritualize it.
Yeah, ritualize that process with all of the singing and the ritual and the dancing and the masks and the music and the celebration of life, that comes with death. And I've always really appreciated the Jewish perspective on it, and also always thought there was a certain somberness to it that that sometimes like more tribal cultures sometimes seem to have in terms of that mourning process, and really turning it into a gathering and a bringing together of people, as compared to like sometimes maybe, I don't know, how maybe more like as the more westernization of death and loss and things like that.
The boss gets to decide how many days you get to take off for grief.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Western culture does not lend itself to grieving very well. I mean, like, for example, if you lose a pet in Western culture, it's like, just suck it up and deal with it. And it's like, no, that can hurt bad. That is a severe and very particular kind of grief that is not as encouraged to be shared and explored as it might be in other cultures. But and Yoni, speaking of your statement about multicultural exploration of grief, I think of I believe it's Ghanan funeral, the meme of where it had the guys that were dancing while they're carrying the coffin on their shoulders.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah, it's like that looks great, man, because when someone is gone, like, we want to celebrate the joy of their life with them, even though they're not here. And I love this idea of making a funeral a more openly joyful, but also openly emotional occasion, instead of encouraging people to wear black and wear a veil to hide the fact that you're crying when this really important person to you has died. It's like we should be open in expressing those emotions, like Janina was saying earlier.
Somber.
Yeah, exactly.
We were talking about New Orleans earlier, right? And one of the things that I really resonate with is a New Orleans second line, where you have the portion where you are somber and you are grieving, and you also have the portion of the funeral where you're dancing and you're celebrating life and you're joyful around. It's really kind of going back to that quote, right? So fitting that it's love that you're experiencing, grief and love all wrapped together. And I think one of the things that's been so hard for so many over the last year, our own family included, but whatever rituals we do have been interrupted in the last year. And that makes it even more difficult when we can't come together in the way that we would, when we can't spend time with family as easily, when we're all wearing masks, we can't even view each other's faces fully. If we do attend the funeral, if we're lucky enough to have a funeral for family members during this time. And, to think about the bare minimum being to be able to have a ceremony, a funeral. What a change that is for so many of us over the past year, and really difficult.
And to bring this back to Wanda, Vision didn't get one, did he? The end of Endgame, it was just Iron Man.
Nope, it was just Vision and Natasha both. That's something that's always made me very angry at the end of Endgame. Everybody's like, it's very sad Tony Stark died. And it's like, 2 other Avengers died too. And I'm sure some Wakandan soldiers also died. I'm sure a lot of people died there, but only Tony Stark gets the funeral, which is bogus.
That's another interesting thing that would amplify the grief a little bit, is that she wasn't given the culturally expected ways to deal with it. The body of Vision, which is a robot, was just picked up and shipped off to be tested on, and she didn't get any even the little ritual that Western society provides us. She was denied.
Oh, right. That's what sets her off, right? When we do go back and we get the retrospective from her point of view, that's what really triggered this grief response of the Hexaflex. Was she was trying to go back to get his body, and she kept saying, I just want to bury him. I just want to bury him. And they wouldn't let her do it.
It was like she had grief bottled inside her, held tight, like when in real life I've got to hang on to get this funeral dealt with. I've got to go through these things. I've got to find my moment. And she didn't get that. And then she leaves and she drives off and she's in alone in that spot. And her grief comes spewing magically out of her, which is how it can feel for people when they hit the moment that they break down.
A lot of times our emotions are kind of like the energy in a soda bottle, right? Like if you shake it up and shake it up and shake it up, that energy has to go somewhere. But if we keep the lid on our emotions, eventually there will be an explosion. And I think very much that's what happens to Wanda. I always say that our emotions are the most powerful side of our inner magic, and our feelings are meant to be felt. That's why they're called feelings. They're not meant to be suppressed. And so I think in Wanda's case, the more she suppressed that inner magic, the more it exploded and then created this alternative universe that she needed to exist in to heal. And when we look at other mammals, whether it's dogs, cats, or bears, or bunnies, when they're injured, they hide out for a little bit until they heal. And I think for a lot of us, when we're going through some kind of pain, whether it's physical pain or heartache, we need some kind of care, whether it's to hide out by ourselves or to receive care from other people before we're thrust back into the world. And I think that that's what a lot of mourning rituals provide, right? They provide connection, they provide care, they provide a safe space where we can feel and let off some of that energy that's inside. And you're so right, Tracy, when you say that right now during COVID, we're kind of robbed of that opportunity of even receiving a hug from another person when we're grieving. We don't have that right now. And I think the timing of the show was so impeccable because I think it gave the voice to the millions of people that didn't have the vocabulary to describe what they've been going through.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the Jewish idea of Shiva, that first week after someone passes, and that there's so much that's prescribed according to Jewish tradition in terms of how the mourners are quote unquote supposed to behave or supposed to act, and how other people who are interacting with mourners are supposed to act as well, and that you're not supposed to greet a mourner until they've greeted you, that it's all very much on the person who's experienced that loss's terms. To a very large degree, and the sitting on low chairs and having, like, you actually in Jewish tradition you don't make blessings for that week. It's just like all of those things that are traditionally important are generally just put aside for an entire week so that you can have your experience of loss and on your own terms and to deal with it in your own kind of way. And it's a really beautiful, really, really beautiful thing. And I'm just, thinking back to all sorts of different experiences of various, Shiva homes, as we call them, that I visited, and how each one is uniquely different, yet they all share this very similar, this is totally on your terms and we're here for you kind of vibe.
Remember when Wanda's talking about how it began and she didn't really understand how this happened because it's chaos magic flying out of her, and she didn't really understand that, and she just remembers feeling so alone. But where does WandaVision end up? She's by herself again. There are people speculating she'll be the villain of Doctor Strange 2. I think they speculated that more before the final episode.
I think that remains to be seen. But again, I mean, I loved WandaVision, but I feel like it didn't it hit Kubler-Ross pretty well, except for acceptance. I feel like it didn't hit acceptance nearly as much as it needed to.
Of course, it bugs me when something perfectly fits one of these classic models, because okay, we're all more complicated than that.
Right, but like I've often said, like the Kubler-Ross model it's not a straight line that we just go through one to the other. People pinball, they skip stages or whatever. But ideally, you want to hit acceptance eventually. And so,
well, I want to hear from the therapists. Like, is it better to grieve with other people you love or to do it alone?
Well, I think we all grieve in different ways. And I think it's so important. Yoni, I liked your statement around like, we're here for you and what this looks like for you. I was thinking, oh my gosh, that sounds wonderful. Like it's just so thoughtful and empathic. And I like the idea that maybe she's seeing herself as wounded, and like Janina brought up, maybe needing to take some time to really process. I'm optimistic by nature, and I very much so tend to see the best in folks first. And so that's my hope, is that she's there kind of doing her acceptance, wounded mammal piece, and she's taking some time to really do the grieving that she didn't do in the same way from the very beginning, because she had this opportunity. And like you were saying, who could blame her? If I had the opportunity and I was in her position to bring my loved ones back and have my future life that I was hoping for, yeah, I would do the exact same thing. So now hopefully she's kind of going backwards, taking the time to grieve. That's my hope. But Yoni knows from our last panel together that I'm always like the hopeful, romantic optimist, like, oh yeah, no, Vision's gonna be fine, right?
You had something, Yoni?
Totally fine.
Yeah, as you were saying that just now, I had this thought, which is that when we see that last scene and when we see that very last scene and you hear the voices of the kids, that we don't know exactly what those voices are, when in time that is. And for all we know, it could be Wanda tuning in to her own pain and kind of recognizing the distress that she might have caused, maybe some kids or something like that, and like working through that on her own terms, with whatever new magical powers that she has, like understanding, I don't know, the effects of imposing that magic on other people. So it could be an internal kind of coping process that we're seeing, not necessarily, the kids trapped in the present moment or whatever that is.
I also think the process of acceptance is a complicated one, and I think that it might look different for different people. So on my end, I actually thought that she did hit acceptance, and I thought, I don't know, I'm not the writer for the show. I'd love to talk to the writers if that's possible, but just seeing the end of her fight with Agatha, and then also the post-credit scene, to me it seemed like she was processing her grief and letting go of her children and letting go of Vision, but also maybe powering up. Her entire life she felt powerless, right? She experienced losses that she couldn't do anything about, and I think for the first time in her life she's realizing that she has access to something that maybe won't let her feel powerless again. And it could be loss of acceptance, where she was on one path and went a different way. But it could also be, depending on how writers depicted post-traumatic growth. And so I don't actually know what we're seeing here until we see what she does with her new powers.
Optimistically, I'm hoping that what we're seeing is acceptance. That's what I want to see, but it all depends on the direction she gets taken.
Yeah, I hope they don't go the villain route.
Yeah, that would be.
It would
that
take
would be,
away from the humanity of this story and just the sheer beauty of it.
That would be lame for a lot of reasons.
Ahsoka Tano should have turned into a Sith, but I think Moana should be good.
Yeah, one thing a lot of people were surprised about by the story, that there wasn't some other big bad that had set things off. And I based on the comic book stories, I had expected there to be. I talked about it as one of these 4 different candidates. While as you're heading in that final episode, it's like there wasn't much room for there to be another one. I'm glad there was not some male character manipulating her. So some people are surprised that Doctor Strange didn't show up in the end credits. Again, she needs learning, and I was glad to see something about her trying to learn, although learning from that book, but not going to Doctor Strange. That would have been just her going to some dude for him to fix things afterwards. So I think it was very important. It's like keeping gender issues out of her grief, where she was grieving in and of herself, not manipulated by a guy. Even Agatha's manipulations were, she wasn't causing the big problem. Wanda had caused the big problem. And so I thought it was a wonderful human story. Anybody have one last thought to weigh in with?
Yes, I just wanted to tag on something Tracy was saying much earlier, but she was talking about us being robbed of normalcy for the pandemic. And I think that's another thing that WandaVision, it gave it back to us, because we still haven't been able to go see Black Widow, you know, even though it's supposed to come out months ago. So like these big Marvel movies that have united so many people together, we haven't been able to experience them together, but we were able to experience WandaVision together the same way. So it was something that the pandemic did not take away from us. If it had come out in a non-pandemic time, we would have watched it the exact same in our own homes at that same pace and discussed it over the next week.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
Thanks, Travis.
yes, thank you all.
Everybody.
Nice to meet y'all.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
day.
Yeah.
Seriously.
It was good seeing you guys.
Thank you.
See you
Bye,
all.
everybody.
All right,
Bye.
thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Have a
Bye.
good
Bye.
one. Bye.
Good to see you, Yoni.
Good to see you.